I'm 60 years old, so how can I really talk about this at this age, right? It's a little awkward, odd, I would say, for someone my age talking about this. But when I was in church one day and Laura came up and spoke to the congregation about her ministry, and she said, if you're interested or you want to volunteer, I just thought about the impact that domestic violence had in my home and how it sort of, shaped my childhood. And I thought it would be interesting to hear more about what she was doing and how I might be able to be helpful. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk today. What I'm going to talk about, I think you said 10 to 15 minutes or so, is maybe give you a little bit of my family history, talk to you a little bit about kind of the impact and what happened, in my family and how that affected me, what I did to try to change that trajectory, and then also I think, how the church could be beneficial or helpful in this, moving forward. So a little bit of family history. So I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and my mom and dad are from Puerto Rico. So they came when they were in their early 20s to kind of start a new life. They weren't very well educated. My dad had a 6th grade education. My mom had a 3rd grade education. They came to DC because an aunt of mine had been here to try to find work and start a new life. I was born in 1962. I think from what I understand from talking to my mom, from the very beginning, it wasn't a loving marriage. I think they had to get married because I once saw a photo of their wedding date, and I was married a few months later. So I think it was more out of necessity, and there wasn't a lot of love. And my father was an alcoholic, so his drinking was evident from the beginning, from what I understand from my mom. And so I think what happened was the drinking, continued to get worse. And my first memories of sort of issues were when I was, 3 or 4 years old. I just remember there was always yelling in the house. There was always yelling between them. I had a younger brother who's about 3.5 years younger than me. So I just remember there never being kind of peace around the house, a lot of yelling, screaming. The first time I remember sort of the hitting and pushing and shoving was when I was around 6 years old. I'm sure it happened before, but this is my first memory of it. And I remember vividly my parents yelling in their bedroom and my mom screaming for me to come help her. So I went into the room and I saw them kind of pushing each other. They were both hitting each other. And so I kind of got in between them to try to get my dad away because, he was the bigger person. And obviously that, I was 6 years old. I'm not I wasn't a big person. And so they did stop though when I came in. But my father the next day, he beat me with a belt buckle. And said, don't ever do that again, get in between us. And so that sort of went on for the next few years. It wasn't like every week or every day, but it was on a regular basis. There was always yelling. The shoving and the pushing would come when my father would either be really, really drunk, or he would leave for days. And then when he would come back, my mom would be very angry about him leaving. And so they would just start, again, pushing, shoving, hitting, yelling, screaming. It got to the point where the only good news was that my father worked in the restaurant business. And so he was gone a lot. I really don't even remember him being much, around the house. So that was, kind of the first thing. I felt like I had a missing parents, right? Because he wasn't around. And when he was, it was always very tense. And we kind of really didn't want him around because when he was around, it was just not a pleasant environment to be around. You never knew what was going to happen. And so I remember an incident where my mom and my brother and I was about 11. We came home and my father was unconscious on the floor. He had taken a bunch of pills and I guess had tried to commit suicide. And I remember telling my mom, I said, let's just leave him there, let him die, because we'll be better off without him. Obviously she didn't do that. She called the ambulance, but that was the kind of environment that domestic violence creates, right? It created an 11-year-old saying, let your father die, right? I'd rather have him die than be around, because it was just so painful. After what happened shortly thereafter, my father did leave the home, and that was a big relief, right? Because there wasn't the daily or the regular yelling, screaming, fighting. There were other incidents that had happened. There was another time when my parents got into a fight and my mom took a phone, and back then the phones were heavy metal, and she hit him over the head with it because they were pushing and shoving each other, knocked them unconscious. There was bleeding all over the place. The ambulance came. Many times the police were called by neighbors, and so for me, there was a lot of shame, a lot of the environment was always tense. I couldn't relax. My friends were 11, 12 years old, and they're out, sort of playing and enjoying, and I just didn't have that. I didn't have that. There's somebody that has their speaker on. If you can all mute, that would be helpful. So that was, the way I would describe it is I really didn't have a childhood. I don't remember having any kind of, let's just go out and have fun and enjoy. And, the biggest care in the world of an 11 or 12-year-old is, what's, going to school maybe. Those were things that I didn't really, couldn't appreciate, right? I also, because my mom, her English wasn't very good, and since my dad left, I then automatically became the head of the household, at 12. Mm-hmm. And that's just not, I don't think it's just not an appropriate position to be in as a 12-year-old, right? I had to mature very quickly. I would have to help her like write checks or, do things that maybe a partner would do, as opposed to a 12-year-old. And so what that created was it created a different relationship with my brother and my mom. It was very dysfunctional. I was more of the dad to my brother and the, quote, husband to my mother in that sense. And it just wasn't like a normal situation. So that brought a lot of shame for me. It brought a lot of, I felt different than everybody else because, my friends were not in that kind of situation. I didn't really feel good about myself. I had a lot of, low self-esteem. It was embarrassing when the police would come. I remember one neighbor one time, he was an older man, yelled at me because, your family's, causing all these problems in this neighborhood, and you shouldn't be here. And I'm 12, right? It's not like my responsibility, but I was feeling that sense of responsibility for our family. I looked at that list that Laura put together of the 10 kind of indicators or issues that happen with kids of domestic violence, and I have 9 of them. So the only one I did not have was, neither of my parents were put in jail. Well, actually, my father was put in jail after he left our family, but not while he was there. So, the impact of that sort of alcoholism and the violence led me to be someone that was always afraid of the next thing, a lot of fear. So subsequently, I started drinking myself. So I started drinking when I was 12. I would when family would have people over, I would have, rum and cokes, and I would drink. And, the first time I remember getting drunk, I was 12 years old, and it was a relief. I felt like I could be somebody different. I felt like the stresses weren't as, there all the time. And so I did kind of drink in my teenage years, and it really took off when I went off to college. I, was kind of alone, and I was drinking almost every day. And, just the drinking kind of helped me forget. Finally, things weren't going well in school. I actually ended up having to drop out because I wasn't going to class. And I had also, been involved in a relationship, and that ended because of my drinking. And I remember just getting to the point, I was 19 years old, and I was getting to the point where I realized I was, turning into my father, because I was drinking. I was, ruining relationships with people I loved. I didn't really have, a good community around me. And I ended up trying to commit suicide myself at age 19. And, I was unsuccessful. But what it helped me realize was that I was just going down this path that wasn't the one that I really wanted to go on, and I needed to make a decision. And so, I did have like a spiritual awakening kind of situation, where I realized that I needed to change my life. And so a few months later, I decided that I needed to stop drinking myself, and I was able to do that. So on May 1st, 1982, I made a decision to stop drinking and to get some help. And that really helped me, change my trajectory and change my life. I think that what I thought at that point was, I had some goals that I wanted, that I wanted to have a good marriage. I wanted to be able to get married at some point and have a good marriage. I wanted to have children. I wanted to be someone that had that could provide for my family, for myself, that could have a good job. I wanted to have, a strong relationship with my faith, and the good news is I'd always had a good, strong relationship with my faith. And that helped me during those times. And so I thought, if I can, end this cycle of trying to be, turning out to be like my father, that maybe I can change. The other thing that made me want to kind of change was that when I drank, I was also violent. So I would get into fights and bars. I would be very aggressive. Also, I was very jealous. And these are all, signs of what, and talking to Laura and understanding domestic violence, is that's kind of the path, right, that men take many times. And I just didn't want to do that, and I even remember a time when, I was dating someone, got into an argument, and I remember grabbing her by the arm, and I just, like, this is not the way that this is supposed to be, and luckily I never hit another woman. I never got into a fight, but I knew that if I continued down that path, that I would probably turn out to be like my father, and repeat the cycle. So I think, in terms of so since that time, right, I've been sober. I've gotten help from therapy. I've continued to have faith in God and my church. I also credit a lot to my marriage, to my wife, and kind of teaching me how to be a husband, how to be a father, how to be a member of a family, because that was something that I did not learn from my own family. And so those were things that have been, very helpful to me, to kind of reach out and ask for help from others that have gone through, a more normal childhood or a more normal family relationship. The environment that I grew up in, what I saw, a man hitting a woman, a man not loving a woman, a man mistreating a woman, I had to kind of relearn that, I had to learn how to do that, because that was not something I learned in my family. I almost had to like reprogram myself to not turn out to be like my father and have all those negative things. And so it's taking, many years of therapy, of doing the things, staying sober, getting help in a 12-step program, having my faith in a higher power. And it's been a long journey, but I think, it's been a healthy one for me. One thing I also wanted to talk about was that, we talked about how the church could be helpful in this. And we did go to church, but my mom never felt comfortable, kind of reaching out to the church to ask for any help. She didn't feel comfortable talking about it to anybody, frankly. There was a lot of shame involved in that. And so, I think just creating some sort of awareness, right, would be incredible, as we in church or in the groups that you all belong to be able to promote that domestic violence is a thing. And it's just like, if people are alcoholics, there's this stigma with alcoholism or drug addiction. But in reality, it's just, it's a disease. And just like domestic violence, there's nothing, if we can destigmatize it, if that's a word, then maybe that would be a great thing to kind of get people to talk more about it and maybe get some help. It would have been great if I had had some kind of help earlier in my life, even as a middle schooler or teenager about this, and it might have helped me to realize that, where the situation I grew up in was not normal, and that there was something that I could do to sort of, learn and not go down that path. That would be helpful. And I think, just, I don't want to take too much more time, but I guess, that's my my story of kind of growing up in that kind of environment, a dysfunctional environment, with domestic violence. It really robbed me of a lot of things that children should experience. And as I said, I've been dealing with that ever since. I still worry about alcohol, and worry about what I might become if I were to go back to drinking. I do, I'm more attuned, right, to seeing things like on TV and things like that about domestic violence, and I'm, but it also has helped me to be more, reaching out, right? So part of my ministry, if you will, has been trying to help other people that have maybe been in similar situations in dysfunctional families. I remember in college, I became a part of Big Brothers, so I kind of reached out to a young boy that was in a similar situation. And I've done that throughout my life. And so I think that's something that at least, made me aware of it, and I'm trying to, give back or help out in any way that I can. And to sort of wrap it up, for me, that was an experience that I wanted to not have my children experience that. And, the good news is, I've been sober for over 40 years. I've been married for 36 years. I have 2 adult children who have never seen me drink. And I also probably one of the most important things I could do for my kids is they've never seen me hit their mother, or they've never seen me treat their mother like I saw. And so I was able to kind of reprogram myself, and to be the person that I am today, and the person that I know God wanted me to be. And so that's my story for today. Thanks for listening.